When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 67. The woman who raised her parents, herself, and ignited her flame to a renewed path of fulfillment. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Mira Rostami. Mira's spiritual journey began when the war between Iran and Iraq destroyed her hometown. War and destruction left deep fear and anxiety in her. From a young age, Mira was fascinated with Rumi's philosophy, which left a deep love for wisdom in her heart. Through her own journey, Mira became acquainted with the practice of mindfulness, and now she has been facilitating meditation for over 18 years in Hamilton, Ontario. Mira's meditation courses are born out of her intense desire to be a facilitator in creating a great thirst in people and integrating a meditative way of being into their everyday lives. Born in Tehran, Iran, to deaf and mute parents, Mira mastered sign language and developed an intuitive grasp of the human mind to understand and help her parents. She was a gifted student throughout her primary and secondary education. After graduating from high school, Mira immigrated to Canada and completed a Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Education. She started working as a high school teacher in the year 2000 and still teaches today. Hello, Mira. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hello. Hi, Salima. Thank you for
Hi.
inviting me. I'm very excited
Ah,
today to be a part of your podcast.
goodness. Yeah. Not, I'm glad you're excited, but I'm also feeling excited as well. I think feeling excited is an understatement. I really am I'm just, what's the word I want to say? I'm really just delighted to have you on the show and have you, just have this opportunity to have you as a guest on the show today. Mostly grateful for your willingness to tell your story.
Thank
I feel blessed and honored to encounter guests who allow me to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw on their strength and draw on their insight and inspiration. It's so wonderful to witness these stories. And for you and me, it's really important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I always say that our problems don't go away. It's just we learn how to carry them differently. And that is the
Mm.
beauty of the work we do.
That's such an important message right from the get go. Problems don't go away, it's how we carry them. In case you don't know what this podcast is all about, what I want to say is that this podcast is really all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. What we know is that no matter the story, there is impact on one's own mental health, and it tends to remain tucked away. This platform really serves in a way to break barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So, together, my hopeful mission is that the both of us are able to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And of course, I bring forward a trend, well, I'm continuing to bring forward a trend, and it's called the mental beauty rethink. Mira, what comes to mind when you hear this phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
I love the term, absolutely, mental beauty. And to me, I always think about the people who walk on the tight ropes, those tightrope walkers. And if you actually pay attention to them, there are always going to be moments that they're moving to the right or moving to the left. But there's always that one moment that they find that balance between the left and right. And when I watched that, I always thought about it like it's just such a beautiful concept to bring that we can never be free from any kind of mental issues that arises. We could be in the dark side and then the light side and then pretty much, but there will be a moment of balance in there that we walk on that rope and we are completely in the right place. What I'm trying to say is that embracing the
Mhm,
duality of the mind or the mental capacity, because it's always going to have places just that are so, difficult to deal with or face,
mhm,
and then all other places that are beautiful and perfect. And we always think, oh, I'm just going to be on this side. And then life brings us to the other side. So just
mhm,
to really be able to take away all this stigma from mental health, I think the key is to realize there will be a moment of balance, that we can walk that path with a lot of strength if we accept that we are going to go in both sides, like
mhm.
bouncing between left and right until we find it, we figure it out.
That is such an awesome way, like such a great analogy and articulation. That was so creative. I'm sitting here thinking about the last time I watched a tightrope walker, and I'm really taking in like the movements of the person and hearing what you had to say, and it really strikes a chord. That is amazing.
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong to go to the left or right. That's the part of walking straight. And but as we said, the society doesn't accept it. It wants you to always to be moving in one direction, and that's not the way the intelligence of the body operates. It has to bring both. It's part of our being, it's part of our biology, and it's a natural way of operating.
And even just the extension of like looking at physical health and mental health, right? And so if you were even to look at, left being one part of health and right being another part of health, balancing the two and is only by bouncing between the two, right? So just being able
Exactly.
to lean in and out and kind of ground yourself so that you can move with momentum.
It's almost like, I have to say, it's not something that you will it, because that puts a lot of pressure on people,
Hmm.
because you think, oh, this is something you have to figure out. It
Right.
almost happens. You go to the left and you go to the right and you go to the left, but you
It's
don't
natural.
reject any sides. And all of a
Yes.
sudden, you're moving forward. You figured
Right.
it out. It's like a knack, like, you just figured it out. And it happened so naturally that it's just, there's no struggle. The key was not to be bothered that you're moving to the left and right, and embrace both sides. And I think that is, to me, mental beauty, when we don't reject the two sides of the mind, because mind will always be dual. Mind will always have beautiful, ugly, big and small, like, everything that we want to have comparison in the mind, we must have some sort of opposite. It's that embracing that. Another example I like to give is like a pendulum. Like when you go with a pendulum all the way to the right, you always keep like build momentum to go to the left. And if you just always choose the left, you build momentum you will never be able to settle. But if you just step back and see this pendulum is the same pendulum that goes to the right and left, it's just the nature of life. It goes to left and right. You just have to step out of it and just watch it instead of just being like, upset. Oh, I'm in the right. Oh, I'm in the left. Oh, this never gonna happen.
Right. Wow, this is so interesting. What a fascinating way of looking at it. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. Mira, I'm ready to dive in and get started. How about you?
Yes,
All
I'm
right.
ready. Yeah.
All right, you've got this. Okay, Mira, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
Well, my title will say Reuniting with the Deepest Parts of My Being.
Can you say it one more time?
Yes, reuniting with the deepest parts of my being.
Reuniting with the deepest parts of my being. Okay. Can you say a little bit about, without giving away your whole story, because we're going to unpack it in a moment, but tell
Yeah.
me more about this title. What does this title mean to you?
I picked this title just because of my life story. I didn't have time, which I think a lot of people, time or the space or the ability to visit the parts of yourself, particularly as a child. You grew too fast, or you had too many responsibilities, or
Mm-hmm.
you weren't allowed to visit them, or
Mm,
you weren't rewarded to visit them or
mm,
embrace them. So it
wow.
seems like we have this, treasure box that
Mm-hmm.
is our whole being that we left at our childhood and we grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And then something big happens, like, you lose someone, you get divorced, you lose your job, and that crack happens, and that,
Mm-hmm.
something opens, and all of a sudden you literally fall into your deepest part of yourself. And sometimes we're not ready to visit.
Right.
But if you have done the work in practice, when you are landing in that place, then it's a beautiful place to visit. And that's what I felt like, for the longest time, I wasn't ready, I wasn't allowing it, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the time or space or permission in many ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. You're only getting me more curious about unpacking and your story and seeing what is going to be unfolded from our conversation. So then let's get to it. Tell us what your untold story is all about.
I actually was born in Iran, 1972, in the middle of summer, to two mute and deaf parents. My parents were not deaf because of old age. They actually both got meningitis as children. But 90 years ago, there weren't that many physicians or doctors or proper antibiotics for the actual disease. So many of them ended up from a high fever, losing the ability to hear or speak. Their nervous system was damaged. My mom at one point couldn't even walk. They had to do a lot of ice cold water therapy. There weren't that many schools for deaf and mute people in Iran. And so my parents grew up with bare minimum education. And when they actually, like, I realized that these are the people who are my parents, I realized the deep responsibility as how much I have to do. And I accepted that as my identity. And I would say my entire life, I devoted to take care of them. I was pretty much their eyes and their ears. People might say, okay, they weren't blind. But when you're not educated and you can't read and write, your children become your eyes as well. I have three other siblings. They were older than me. Naturally, they got married and left. A lot of the responsibilities were on my shoulder, and it was not the right time in Iran either. There were a lot of the revolution we went through. I was very only 7 when the revolution happened, and I had to take care of everything.
You
And
were only 7 years old.
I was 7 years old
Is
when the
that
revolution.
when you're because you have three older sisters, and as you said, they were much older. So as they, went on with their life, how old were you when your last sister left home? Were you raised by your sisters, or
I
how
had,
did
yeah,
that work?
they actually contributed a lot to
Mm-hmm.
my growing up for sure, because having deaf and mute parent, obviously when you get up in the middle of the night and you cry, there's nobody to answer your cry, right?
Well, they
So
can't
my
hear.
sisters contributed by, tying a rope to my hand, to my
Mm-hmm.
mother's hand, and then
Mm-hmm.
to their own hands. And what happened that every time I cry, they pull the rope and wake my mother up so they
Mm-hmm.
can, she can feed us and take care of us. So they did a lot, but as I said, two of them older left,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was a little older than me, 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But naturally, as a younger person at home, most of the responsibility were pretty much on my shoulder. I think I was about 16 when the other one got married, and eventually we all came to immigrated to Canada. One of the reason was that at the time there were no FaceTime, there were no Skype, nothing. And they were so disconnected from my sisters, and I thought it's a great idea if we can all be together, because I was just not able to take care of my parents at that time all by myself. Naturally, because my dad liked to drink, and there were the
Okay.
morality police in Iran. Like, you think something as simple as that was very dangerous, particularly if the alcohol was not made or prepared properly by particular
Mm-hmm.
company. So there was all homemade alcohol, and think of my dad being deaf and mute on top of it, just
Right.
pretty much becoming blind too because of the wrong alcohol. It was a lot of stress on me. And also, myself was a victim of the morality police, which you hear about it a lot these days on
Can you
TV.
say, actually, Mira, can you say a little bit more about what the morality police is? I want to make sure that our listeners really have an idea of who they are.
Yeah, so we have two different types of police, one
Okay.
that takes care of like crime and
Mhm.
different things, and the
Okay.
morality police is the one that actually implements the Islamic laws.
Okay.
So if for example you are walking on the street with a boy that you have no relationship with, like you're not married to,
Hmm.
they technically arrest you. So
How
you
would they
can't
know?
go to the park with a boy, you can't have boyfriends, you can't, dress up inappropriately. And inappropriate by that, women, like I was in middle school, and I was wearing white shoes, and the principal said you're not allowed to wear white shoes. So things like that is just they come after you for everything to make sure that you are following the laws of the religion.
Did you have any encounters with the morality police yourself?
Absolutely. Like I was about 13 years old,
Okay.
and I was walking home, and there were like two morality police on the motorcycle who passed by me, and they splashed acid on my face.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I was only 13, and they had like these syringes filled with car battery acid. At that time, I noticed something is burning, and someone was watering the plants just few meters ahead of me. I grabbed the hose, I washed my face,
Hmm.
but yeah, all my hair, my clothing, everything burnt, and half of my face. I had to get a lot of treatment, a little bit of um, help from surgeons and everything. But overall, as a 13-year-old, I have to say that was a huge trauma for me.
Yeah,
And
no kidding. But what
particularly,
did they say? Like, did you find out what you were being, like, punished for? Like,
no,
you were just walking home, like, from
yeah,
school, I'm guessing?
absolutely. Or I probably had few hair strands coming out of my hijab, like I don't have a perfect hijab. But who
Okay.
is 13-year-olds and not very careful, right?
Right.
And yeah, and they did that. They did that to create fear and just control. And I'm so proud of the people right now standing up and not putting up with it, because at that time I don't think we had enough power. And when we
Mhm.
complained, they said, well, we don't know, we can't do anything.
Well, all it's
But
because it's all, fear. It's all
yeah,
conditioned in fear, right?
yeah. It was a
Wow.
very crazy situation. And the worst part of it was when I went back to school after having all these
Mhm.
burnt skin, everything, then you get
Mhm.
teachers or the
Oh, yeah.
admins who actually confirm that almost like you deserve to get this because your job is not perfect. Like, and then you just lose that kind of sense of belonging and you feel like, what am I doing? And so, in a way, at one point, I was
Mhm.
happy leaving the country because you just don't feel as a woman you just had that much appreciation for your freedom.
And that's important to say, right? Because these are criminal acts in the name of religion, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is even what the
Absolutely.
religion is about.
We should have the freedom to choose,
Mhm.
like I think any kind of fear
And you
imposed.
were walking down the street. You weren't doing anything inappropriate. You weren't causing harm to anyone. You were just minding your own business, trying to get home.
Yeah,
Obviously, people
that's
don't know your own responsibilities and the extra added layers of stress that you had to make sure you got home to attend to your parents. But you're just minding your own business, and here you're being penalized.
yeah, they did that all over the country. They have these SUVs, they go. And so I remember there was an exhibition once, and my friend and I, like, basically she could speak English very fluently, and there were these foreigners in this exhibition, and so she started speaking English to them. And then these morality police came and arrested us because they said it's inappropriate. You kind of talking to these men and it's inappropriate. And we were talking about science or whatever it was, and they arrested us and took us to this place. Or other stories, like when my friends would have a little party or like go out with their boyfriends to get us arrested. And sometimes even they force you to marry if you have the appropriate age. They say, you have to marry this person. They force you. Like, it's a forced heaven, which I don't think it's right.
And so when you got when your face got burnt, when you got home, how did your parents react?
My mom was almost passed
Mhm.
out, like she was so scared. But
Mhm.
hard to explain these things to deaf and mute parents. And as like most parents these days, they have the phone, they hear about their kids and they know what's going on. But imagine I was taken away, we have no cell phones, we just had nothing. So they were pretty worried when I was away. And then when I came back, they were just not happy at all.
Mhm.
But there's nothing they could do.
I can't imagine what that was like for your parents. And, that actually gets me curious about you in the sense of like, being born in a home where this is your parents suffering and you have this role of being the caregiver and taking on all these added responsibilities. How did that influence your identity
Well,
of
that's a beautiful
yourself?
question, Salma. Thank you, because I think that is what I am struggling a lot to figure out, to reparent
Mhm.
myself in a way. Because when you do
Mhm.
have deaf and mute parents, unlike other parents who have a lot of instructions, a lot of stories, a lot of things to kind of imprint into their
Mhm.
children, to give them guidance and
Mhm.
those kind of I call it identity or ego identity. It's a lot more massive than what I received. So my
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
identity was, it's there still, like certain things that I had, but it's like showing up into a mask party without a mask.
Mhm.
That was
Mhm.
me showing up to life.
Mhm.
I had I didn't have
Mhm.
that protective barrier that most people build around themselves as their ego identity to allow them to move through life and have a container to move them through it. I felt like I was missing that container the whole time. So what happened to me is that I started adopting other people's container as mine. And I started becoming overly nice, overly giving, or like giving and giving and giving and doing. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be, hugged or embraced. And it's because I had to do that for them. I wanted to other people give it to me. And in a way, when you take someone else's identity as yours, particularly in relationship and marriages, they fail miserably because you don't have any of your own. And so you merge into other people's identity and you demand that they give you the life source or energy that you can't give yourself because you don't have a container to experience it.
And so that sounds like you had a lesson there. So tell me a little bit more. This identity or not having identity or sorting through your identity. How did that show up in your relationships?
As I said, when you don't have the right container, not knowing that, so it was just me asking to love me. And I couldn't understand that at that time, that the whole crying is for me to get to know me, to come and to come home to me. And that's what happens. And it's not just my case. I think a lot of us either have no, like, not a healthy identity. We literally go to these, as I said, mask parties with a broken mask. And most people say, well, ego is not like that important. You just have to go to your soul, your inner being. But to me, that ego container, it's like really important because it makes you feel safe. It gives you that sense of safety. If I don't have a container, it's very hard to look at the content of that container. And so I had a hard time looking at the content because my content was all over the place. I didn't have this container to hold it.
So give some examples because it seems like, you're expressing some really important aspects of experiences that you've had, especially without this ego container that was not cultivated for you, that you had no idea. I don't even think you, from what you're saying, it doesn't even sound like you even knew you needed an
No,
ego
no.
container, right? Like you had no reference point. So what sort of things were impacted? Like, how did that show up in your life? What ended up breaking, or what kinds of things did you endure along the way?
Number one, I couldn't sustain a relationship. And so
Hmm.
I had people cheating on me or, leaving me. And I literally fell apart as far as mental well-being because you definitely go to
Hmm.
depression. And I think pain
Hmm.
and depression and anxiety, because it's not because something did something bad to you. It's because you land in a place after that falls apart, someone's identity you take because you don't have your own and they leave. Now I'm landing in my own being. And my own being was so unfamiliar. I don't know it. It's like a dark place.
Right. So you were living someone else's identity and then it got stripped and then you're
Exactly.
dumbfounded.
But
Like,
I'm
now what do
landing
I
on
do?
myself. I have nowhere else. And it's
You're landing on yourself and you're
exactly,
saying, I don't know what this
exactly.
is, right? But it's unfamiliar to
It's
you.
so dark and it's
Okay.
so
Okay.
like has no
Mhm.
like label, right? Because
And so when you were in these dysfunctional relationships, were you treated well, or did you end up experiencing other sort of discourse? Because you mentioned a few moments ago that you wanted to be loved and embraced, and so you would continue to give, give, and give, even if it wasn't good for you. How did
yeah,
that show
no,
up?
the I actually got married 3 times. So, and the first time
Okay.
I had a 1-year-old, and my ex went to Japan and literally cheated on me. And I had no clue. He never told me. And I had to go all the way to Japan with a
Mm-hmm.
1-year-old, thinking that I'm going to live a
Mm-hmm.
life with him because he basically was studying there.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, no,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be with this woman. So here was a total disaster for me to come back to a life. But I was so vulnerable and so
Right.
like lost. I would say the feeling is lost. When you have no container, you're lost. So you're seeking another container. And I'm thinking, okay, my
Mm-hmm.
first husband was
Mm-hmm.
Canadian, blonde, blue eyes. My mistake, I should have married an Iranian person, right? So I fall into the lap
Mm-hmm.
of this
Mm-hmm.
person in Iran who was living in Iran and I was living here. And what
Mm-hmm.
happened was that this person told me, okay, come to Iran. I'll, like, we'll do this and that business and that business. And I'm so vulnerable and I have no identity. And then all this glorious information. And I say, okay, I'll go in there. And he was not the right person.
Right.
He was abusive. He was not treating. And I was there with a
Mm-hmm.
Canadian kid. I
Mm-hmm.
was terrified. And I, just like movies,
Right.
I literally had to leave the country
Right.
and run
Like your
away,
little son.
just like movies. Overnight, taken off and come back. Because if you don't know it, in
Just
Iran,
overnight.
if you
Mm-hmm.
have to get a passport, you need the permission of your husband.
No way.
I was lucky that I still had 4 months left on my passport
Mm-hmm.
from my previous marriage. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, from
Okay.
going to Iran, I still have a previous estate which is divorced. Therefore, I just
Okay.
took that 4 months and I ran away because if I stayed and my passport expired, he would not let me
Mm-hmm.
leave.
You know, when you tell me this part,
Yeah,
it reminds
yeah.
me of that
Mm-hmm.
movie from long, long time ago,
Yep.
Not Without My Daughter.
That is exactly.
I think I remember watching it in elementary school and it blew my
I
mind
mean, it
away.
wasn't at that extent of the religious part of it, but there was definitely some
Mm-hmm.
possessiveness or some mental health issue, like that
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to capture
Okay.
me, and I had no access to internet. My phone was disconnected. It was
Mm-hmm.
just
Wow.
the the help of the
That's a
universe that
lot.
came and rescued me, and I
Right.
came back to Canada.
Right. And
Yeah.
you were able to
But when
get
I
back to
came back,
Canada.
I physically,
Oh.
emotionally, mentally, just now thinking about having no control, you fall apart. So everything went wrong from like
Mm-hmm.
pain
Mm-hmm.
and, depression. I was taking a lot of medications. I was having surgeries because I just had, certain bleeding. Like I had endometriosis, I had hysterectomy, on and on and on. Things went
Mm-hmm.
completely
Mm-hmm.
haywire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what
Right.
happens, when your mental health or well-being is not in the balance, then it would affect your body, and your
Right.
body can't
Yes.
keep like.
Yes. Your
No, so
body
when
couldn't
people say,
keep
oh,
up anymore.
forgive,
It
and I say, well, I'll forgive, but my body's not forgiving. It's easier to say, oh, I will forgive, mentally, and I move on, but the body says, no, I'm not ready. It falls away. It keeps the score. Yeah, absolutely.
there's a book, right?
Hmm.
The body keeps the score. Yeah, it's a very insightful read actually. But yeah, you're very much articulating how, the process, what our body endures and what it requires is very different than the other
That's right.
aspects, right? So it's not a race for time, but it's about honoring each space and being able to slow down enough to say, okay, what do I need for this part? So if I'm truly going to forgive someone, what do I need to work on? What do I need to
Yep.
address? What do I need to acknowledge?
And all this
Right?
time, I still have to look after
Hmm.
my parents. All this time. So the time continued, and My dad passed away, and my mom pretty much became very lonely, and I had to become even double the friend that she needed, or double the parent she needed, because
Mhm.
my dad had a little bit of more skills about, going out and doing things, but my mom absolutely
Mhm.
was frightened. I remember when we came to Canada, she
Mhm.
wouldn't even go on elevators. That's how terrified she was. No,
She
and
probably
the
didn't know what they
big
were,
dogs and
right?
all the things that, we think everyone knows about it. So I had to be her identity, and I had a certain identity I built around her, being her parent.
Mhm.
And what happened that
Mhm.
last February, my mom passed away. And then all of a sudden, everything about me shattered. Because what do I have? I built identities for myself. Like when I came during the time that I was suffering after all these unsuccessful marriages and all the time I suffered, I was lucky enough to meet a very, very beautiful teacher, Jivasu. And he really allowed me to become who I am today because he gave me the opportunity to build a mask, a persona as a meditation teacher. And this persona mask, temporary, allowed me to be able to have a container so I can actually start looking at my content. And the interesting was like I had no face, no container. I built a container. So when you build a container, you tap into your wellness reserves. You build it just tapping in there because there's so much in your body and brain that you tap into. So I started building this body and mind using this wellness system. But when my mom passed away, my container shattered again. That's what I use this
Right.
title, reuniting with the deepest part of my
Yeah.
being, because this time
Mm.
I
Mhm.
landed on a ground, but I was willing this time to look at this ground. Remember, I told you when you break in, you don't know, you're not familiar. So, all the 18 years of practice and meditation, all the things that I did, what they did to me, they allowed me to land on this place of unknown without fear, and visit and
Right.
see and embrace and cry. Give permission to carry them all
Mhm.
without being
Mhm.
shameful or
Mhm.
without being, like,
Mhm.
just rejecting it and not wanting it and not knowing what it is or being overwhelmed.
Yeah, that permission to explore with in the absence of fear or the absence of shame is so
Absolutely.
critical to your healing.
Because I think one of my biggest
Mhm.
thing was shame. I was
Mhm.
in comparison, always comparing my life with other kids, their parents, my parents, their lives, my lives, just like my life. Um, like what kind of life they have, money, like wealth, all the
Right.
trips or the traveling they can. I have none of that because my parents, I mean, they couldn't give me
Right.
that.
It's quite a journey. Mira, when people come to see me for therapy, individuals are typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started where they come with like a bulk of things that they want to explore and work on, and they don't know how to start or where to start, like what point they should be looking at. Some people are in the middle where maybe they're experiencing something acute or they're just in the middle of their journey and they're now looking for extra set of eyes for navigating and charting a path or even just getting supports while they sort
Mhm.
through some of the tumult. And some people are like looking back. Maybe they are needing to address some unfinished business or they're trying to gain closure on older aspects of their life because they want to start a new chapter in their life or they want to be able to embrace some newness in their life. What would you say is true for you? What part of the journey are you in? Would you say that you're getting started in the middle or looking back?
I don't know what you exactly asking me. What happened to me is that for the longest time, I tamed my mind. Now that I've landed into the past, as you say, and I look back, But what I see is that that child that needs to reparent itself, however, has no energy. That body requires energy. In order for you to be able to face what is in the past, most of us go in there and we think we're ready. But if the body is so depleted, it's just not ready to meet. What I find that because I have cultivated this practice of grounding myself and knowing how to give myself the time and the energy I need, it makes it so much easier to see what it was in there. Because if you don't have the space for it, if you don't have the energy for it, then you will. I always felt like when I went there and I didn't have energy for it, then I was just disappointed with myself, thinking like, oh, look at you, you can't do it. You're crying again. You're just falling apart again. And
But that's you in the
yeah,
middle of your journey at the time. Right now, wouldn't you say that it sounds
yeah,
like you're looking back now, that you found a way to give yourself time and
absolutely.
space and
Yes,
energy?
yes. I am looking back, but
Yeah,
that space and energy
yeah.
is essential. Absolutely. I almost feel that
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
have to go and meet that little child and reparent it. I have to,
Mhm.
and I need still an
Yes.
identity
Yes,
because we have to
absolutely.
live in this world. But this identity, it will be my own container, something I am going
Mhm.
to give this child to to live in this world. But I'm giving permission and I'm not any more afraid of, feeling shame or meeting the unworthiness or meeting my anger or seeing it. Because if I don't get there and sit and visit with all of them, I will literally bypassing to this blissful state that most of us try to get in. Just like, oh, I'm okay. But they're not going anywhere. They're still there calling us, wanting us to integrate them. And I think integration is the key.
So, now that we've talked a lot about what life was like in Iran, what it was like to be the caregiver of your parents, and be their voice and be their eyes and ears and take on all that responsibility, not have your own container, or even grappling with what your identity was, going through all of these different intense life moments. And I know you started to speak about some of these things already, but from the mental health perspective, how would you say your untold story has affected your mental health? I just heard you say some emotions that you experience, like anger and unworthiness. Can you say a little bit more about how anger and unworthiness showed up for you?
I'm going back a little bit about that untold story. And I think I'm so grateful for what you do because I think it's so important we have the courage to share our stories. And everyone has a story, and it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you say it
Mm-hmm.
loud or say it to yourself, your story is the
Mm-hmm.
blueprint of getting to know yourself. This is like your painting. This is how you get to know yourself. And I didn't have enough in my life to put that story together. As I said before, I tried to live other people's stories. And when I put my own story
Mm-hmm.
together, because nobody was used to that kind of reaction or kind of like
Mm-hmm.
life from me, everyone was in a shock
Mm-hmm.
because no one was used to me being
Mm-hmm.
unhappy or crying or being angry or expressing, because everyone got used to the
Mm-hmm.
identity that is dissolved in everyone else's identity. So when I pull back and try
Mm-hmm.
to experience myself, that's an unfamiliar thing for a lot of people. So a lot of people end up, including myself, losing friends, losing people that you used to have around you
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know you anymore. Because who are you? You used to be
Right.
this nice person, and everything I said, you said yes. Everything I asked, you said yes. All of a sudden, you're not saying yes.
All of a sudden,
Disagree.
you're as disagreeing, saying no, thank you. I'd
Exactly.
rather not.
The boundaries.
Setting all
And
your
then all of a
boundaries.
sudden, you But the
Yes.
beauty of it is you attract new set of people into your life. But that is part of it. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
untold story of mine, that's how it affected me, that I was buried
Mm-hmm.
so deeply. And no one,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, to
Mm-hmm.
this day, a lot of people don't know my story. They just think, oh, Mira is such a
Mm-hmm.
happy person, always smiling. And if they hear this, it's like, what? I
Well,
don't
they're
know.
all gonna
So
hear
that's what I'm
now.
saying. When you bring some sort of platform like
Mm-hmm.
that, I think it's beautiful because everyone
Mm-hmm.
has a story. Yes.
Thank you. All right, so tell us, what is your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
I go back to that mental beauty, and I
Mm-hmm.
want them to know that the key to that balance is to increase capacity, not to get rid
Mm-hmm.
of what is ugly and unpleasant in our lives. Because I think that's a nature of life. It will always throw at us things that we don't want, we don't desire, we don't like, things that are hard, things that are
Mm-hmm.
just heartbreaking, things that are just
Mm-hmm.
completely 300, like 180 degrees change your life forever. But if
Mm-hmm.
you increase the capacity, then you have space for them. Then they can be there
Mm-hmm.
without harming you. I'm just going to give you an example of think of a small ball, like a golf ball. And if
Mm-hmm.
you hold the golf ball in a small cup, therefore there's not enough room in that cup, you see the golf ball. All you see is a golf ball. But if you put it in a very big
Mm-hmm.
jar, a very, very big jar,
Mm-hmm.
this golf ball is still there, but it's very small sitting there. And nothing
Right.
changed about that golf ball. It's still the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But because your capacity increased, you have more room
Mm-hmm.
for that golf ball. Then you now, and that's what I
Mm-hmm.
said, that now you can access the wellness resources that we have. We have so much wellness reserve in our body and brain, but we can't access it because we don't practice to increase our capacity. Instead, we practice to get rid of the golf ball. And we're fighting that
Mm-hmm.
golf ball all the time. I don't want it. Just take it away. I don't want the resistance.
Mm-hmm. The resistance.
So my
We're
message
focusing
is
on the
like the way
resistance.
I could actually have all of these things in my life is that through practice, you can call it mindfulness, you can call it, any kind of
Mm-hmm.
body and mind practices, it will increase your capacity to be able to have things. That's why I say you carry them now differently. They don't have the same weight that they
Mm-hmm.
used to, even though they're
Right.
still there.
I really like your golf ball analogy. That's fantastic. I'm curious, for you, what was really game changing in terms of inspiration? Something that was really close to you that reflects your untold story. So, is there like a quote or a book or a person or an event, something that really spoke to you or speaks to you now?
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned that Rumi was always so dear to me as a child. I used to read
Mm-hmm.
all the poetry, and I was
Yeah,
always
all the poetry,
fascinated.
all the
And
books.
one quote, Rumi said that we seek outside the wonders we carry inside of us because the outside looks brighter, more known to us, more
Mm-hmm.
familiar to us. It has more techniques and
Mm-hmm.
strategies and tools. We think, oh, if I just go outside, I will be free from the pain that I feel inside. But the answers to all of
Mm-hmm.
that is inside of us. The life force that it goes through us, that
Right.
intelligent life force, it has all the answers. Just like when
Yes.
you have a cut in your finger, you 100% trust the cut will disappear and you'll get better.
Yeah. So, what is a cause or organization that has been impactful to you on your journey?
Yeah, I like to shout out to Somatofulness, and
Mm-hmm.
the person who actually started this teachings, like his name is Jivasu. So if you go to Somatofulness or
Okay.
jivasu.org, you can actually find him. But
Okay.
for the past 18
Okay.
years, I actually learned so much about how the mind and body operate and how they work together. And the key is just
Mm-hmm.
key, like his teaching, is that we all are so unique and we all have our own natural personalities. So if we
Mm-hmm.
simply follow one or for like one prescription for everyone and say, oh, everyone has to do this,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't work. Each one of us, we need to study ourselves. We need to know what is our constitution. How do we respond to fear? What
Mm-hmm.
does fear does to our mind and body? And then try to do things that
Mm-hmm.
we are in control, like take care of that body and mind the way we can. But everyone is different.
Yeah, it sounds like he has a lot of teachings that a lot of people can learn
Yeah,
from. So
thanks.
that's
Yeah,
really wonderful. I can see how it's been so beneficial for you in the journey that you've
absolutely.
been on.
Like, and I like him
Mm-hmm.
because he was one of those teachers never wanted to be followed. Because I have a hard time with so many teachers. Like they're just all of a sudden you're part of
Right.
an organization, you have to follow them. And I felt that his main message was your body, the life force in your body is your biggest and the most important teacher. You just have to find and learn its language.
Okay, so Mira, how can people connect with you if they would like to? What platforms can you be found
Well,
on?
I'm on Instagram, Mira Rostami,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a group called Meditation with Mira. If you go on Instagram, you can actually contact me. My contact information is there. And yeah, it's a private thing, but you can join for sure.
We'll get all of those details from you so that we can put everything on the
Thank
show
you.
notes page for you. So
Absolutely.
everything will be there. So guess what, Mira? You've just dared yourself to
Thank
share.
you. No, I really
Congrats.
appreciate it. I am very happy. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome so much, Mira. In fact, I would just like to take a moment really to convey my gratitude for you in the story that you've shared today, the layers of your story, for the emotional turbulence that you've endured, that you shared, the emotional turbulence that you've not only endured, but moved through, learned from, and responded
Thank
to.
you.
And what an extraordinary transformation. Your healing journey has been nothing short of
Thank you.
encouraging. It has been nothing short of encouraging. And I'm truly grateful to have been able to hear and witness
Thank
your
you.
story today. Honestly, thank you for the deep conversation and for all the sharing.
I'm honored.
Once again, Mira, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.